Hi everyone, welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. My name is Fans.
And I'm Rich.
And I'm Haikers.
Hey! Hey, we genuinely sound pleased that you're here.
I'm pleased that you're pleased.
The last time we were all meant to be in a room together, I had flu and then I missed the Super Bowl with you guys. So yeah, it's nice to be back as a trio. So you both don't remember
I mean, it would have been
that.
a trio.
You're both like, well, yeah, what? Yeah.
We invited you?
Yeah. Ouch. Okay. Wow.
If it makes you feel better, Faz, we had a perfectly lovely time today.
Oh yeah, I'm glad. I was under a blanket crying, like for more than for the Chiefs getting whooped, and also just because I wasn't well. But yeah, it's good to have you, Haikers. Thanks for coming on the podcast again.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
What was it? Last October, I believe you did XCOM 2, I think, wasn't it? And
yes,
Brutal Legend, which is like quite a lot of pop from people, wanting to play or have played Brutal Legend, and I hadn't really heard of it that much until you brought it to the table. Now all I ever see is someone on my Instagram with Brutal Legend sort of on their shelfie Sundays or whatever.
When you point it out, you start spotting it. That's just, it's everywhere.
Well, it's just your phone, the algorithm reads my mind or whatever it does now, some shit.
Are you suggesting that you've got some kind of augmented reality where it's actually like you've heard it mentioned and now your phone is putting it on people's shelves for you?
Yeah.
What a terrible future we live in.
Present now.
Yes.
Anyway, but yeah, no, thank you for coming. And you came away from a potential boiler issue. That is,
It's very much a boiler issue. We're beyond potential.
That's how committed you are to the Living La Vita Loca brand that we definitely have made.
Yeah. I am willing to step away from problems I cannot currently fix to be distracted by friends and leave my wife to deal with that.
That's the right thing to do. I mean, I've just run away from a Cub Scout group, so I want to explain that, but I'm not going to. So, what are you running away from, Rich?
I don't know, just responsibility, I guess.
I'm a little bit upset you didn't introduce yourself as the D word after I revealed that my son Oscar decided that he was trying to work out what the D word was as a swear word, and I explained that Richard the first name could be used as Dick, and and now Sally thinks it's really funny just to kind of call you Dick Whittington from afar.
That's good.
I don't.
If I had £1 for every time I've heard that.
Oh really?
Oh yes.
Oh, that's boring. Right? Okay.
Really dull.
That's ridiculous.
I'm sorry, but it is.
I wouldn't have thought that would have been the case.
Yeah,
specifically Dick Whittington from afar.
That's not from afar. But, there was a guy at university that would constantly refer to me as Dickie.
Oh, really?
Because he knew it would annoy me.
Oh, my God.
But also...
What's your name? Who are you? We're coming for you.
But also, we have another friend called Richard who for ages we called Dick. And, that was how you would tell the difference between us.
Right, okay.
But, yeah, he has since reverted to Rich as well, which is doubly confusing.
Yeah.
It's all right. We don't see each other very often.
For that reason?
Yeah. Was he the guy? Was he the guy who called you the wrong name? It's just like... He was sad about his own name, so he was like, no, I'm going to start doing it to you.
Start taking it over quietly from the shadows.
Well, we're starting to get into a bit of a fighting mentality, so we may as well...
Is that what this is?
Yeah.
I'm just to thump you for reasons I'm not entirely sure why.
Exactly. I was like, I'm going to wind you about your name, you about your boiler, and then
we can have a fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent.
Or we could just talk about fighting games. Probably the more civil thing to do.
Okay.
So, which I would say sits well in your wheelhouse, Rich. Generally, that in your likes and desires nowadays.
Nowadays, yeah. I still am not very good at them, but I enjoy them. I like them. Yeah. They respect my time, and I like that.
Yeah, fair enough. Haikers, how are you at fighting games?
Oh my days! I'm aware of them. You know what? I loved couch co-op when I was 10 years old. Tekken, and a bit older at university. Soul Calibur 2.
Nice.
So many hours wasted with people who were on my level. Never had to deal with a kind of computer, an AI opponent that knows all the button combinations and knows how to do them. Sitting, drinking, button mashing, that is my style of fighting.
There's not enough youngsters kicking around nowadays to just beat up couch co-op games. You can't hire them to come round and be like, right, sit there while I beat the shit out of you on Tekken.
Just wandered around the halls of residence in Leeds with a PlayStation 2 saying, please, someone fight me. And I just got asked to leave. So rude.
That's dangerous. So yeah, and for I guess for all my sort of ability of fighting games, I say all of it.
Singular.
Yeah, I think it's been made quite clear over 115 episodes or whatever it is that I don't really dabble in them too often, and I just get my ass kicked constantly. So, and it's bad for my self-esteem, really. Yeah, so I've not brought any games to the table this week. I'm kind of leaving it up to. Certainly, I was going to say Haikers. I looked at Haikers. Haikers looked back at me. Then we looked at Rich.
It's all right, I got it. I'll do it.
We're kind of going to leave it up to Rich a little bit. Well, you had a bit of a rest the last couple of weeks, even though you.
Fuck off.
I was just
You've
about
been quite
to
lazy,
say.
Rich.
I was just about to say, even though
Pulled a not inconsiderable weight, you lazy bastard. Yeah, Faz, get on with it. Come on.
You really want to fight, and so what I was about to say, even though that actually in the end you did most of the talking on the Hitman podcast.
Oh yeah.
But you've not reviewed per se a game for the last couple of weeks, but you have been playing Fatal Fury: City of the Wolves.
I have.
Which SNK.
Yep.
But there's not been a Fatal Fury game for 26 years, I believe.
Something like that, give or take. Yeah.
So, is it a good idea for them to come back? And how are you finding it so far?
I mean, shall I just launch into my not inconsiderable set of notes?
Yes, you can do
shall
if you want
dance
to.
around it a little bit.
Yeah, dance around me. Dance around me.
Can't hit what you can't see, etc., etc.
Well, I'm wildly just hammering square in the hope that that will
Stand
actually
still.
Which one's horizontal attack?
I mean, it's good that they brought it back.
I was going to say, is it a good idea that it's come back?
I think it's a good idea that it's come back because, like, I know we've talked before, probably more me. Talked before. No, it's all right. That's good because otherwise this wouldn't work. But before now we've said about like Tekken not really having much like competition and stuff like that, and obviously like when it comes to 2D fighting games, there are a lot more of them in general than compared to 3D ones. I think is fair to say, but it's especially having had like a relatively recent re-release of like Capcom versus SNK 2 and stuff like that. It's kind of nice to have SNK quote unquote back. They never really like went anywhere necessarily. They were still putting stuff out. I mean, look at like Samurai Showdown and all that kind of stuff. But it's particularly for the follow up to Mark of the Wolves and all that kind of stuff, which was a really, really fun fighting game back in the day, as if I was there.
I think we were. I was 11, so
well, this is the thing, because back then I was definitely like trying to work out what that cool game that I saw at the arcade was, and it turned out it was Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Mark of the Wolves I came to way later. Like this would be during the pandemic, probably, or just before, maybe, and started trying to drill into it. And then, so for me, it doesn't feel like it's been that long a wait. It's been kind of like a perfect amount of time. So yeah, it's great. I think it's great that it's back.
Speaking of which, then, so I know you mentioned a few times on the podcast before about how the pandemic was almost an era where you started picking shmups up again.
Yep.
Was that very much the same with fighting games in general?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was like, I mean, I've kind of touched on this a couple of times. Like, I always used to gravitate towards those big, like, what was it, like, narrative single player experience type things where you've got a big story to pull you through and all that kind of stuff. And then you fast forward to like Red Dead Redemption 2 and things like that, and you're like, well, I need to take a week off work to sort of get through this.
I'm not sure again.
I'm not sure I'm willing to invest that amount of time. I'm not sure like the kind of it's going to reward me for my time investment like that. And it was that thinking of, well, if I'm going to invest time, I am, despite my best efforts, a grown-up now. Like if I'm going to invest time in something, I want to feel like it's meeting me halfway and giving me something back. And I felt that the kind of, rather than going for the kind of, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, I just can't think of a better way of putting it, but like the kind of easy gratification of having a story fed to me, I felt it was far more satisfying going into something like a shmup or a fighting game and using that time to feel like I'm honing some kind of skill. Even if it is not a useful skill in the real world, like you are still having to basically do the complex geometry of reading the screen at 60 frames a second and then have decent enough dexterity to perform whatever it is you are trying to perform in the game.
Yeah.
And once I started to actually drill into how to play these things. In fact, it was Mortal Kombat X was the first fighting game that I was like, right, I'm going to make a point of sitting there, looking stuff up on YouTube and actually learning how to play a fighting game. And like, I was having to start from like, how do I do the inputs with the stick, all the buttons and all that kind of stuff, like proper basic stuff. And once I started to build that up, I was like, oh, like the payback I'm getting for this practice and this time I'm putting in, it was way more satisfying for me.
So that brings us really nicely onto, I guess, what Haikers has been kind of looking at, I guess, last few weeks. Because I certainly, when you say all that, it sounds wonderful, but I struggle with that kind of experience when I come to fighting games, because I feel like I try to learn them, but then I seem to do a bad job of it. Haikers, tell us a little bit about what you've been experiencing the last few weeks in terms of what you've been going through with learning a fighting game or fighting games, and what have you been trying to dabble with? Oh, got a pen. Hadouken! Wow. Hope we don't have to make any more notes.
Faz has just laid out Rich. It was always going to happen.
With the biro. Do you know what the biro's got on it? The Flying Scotsman.
Nice.
Nice. That'll do no damage.
The actual shrunk down Flying Scotsman.
Yeah.
Yes. We didn't even know it was missing.
Yeah.
So what have I been looking at for the past little while? Mostly the you lose screen. That seems to be my main experience. So Rich, I deeply respect everything that you've said, and it could not be more inaccurate for me in terms of the sort of the experience. My experience over the past couple of weeks has been frustration. Spoilers. So I dug into my Steam library. I'm not a fighting game aficionado, for a number of reasons that I'll probably come on to. But the one that I did have stashed away, I think from a Humble Bundle somewhere back in the day, to steal a catchphrase, was Skullgirls, or specifically Skullgirls Encore. Yes.
Cool. I was going to say, so definitely Skullgirls Encore.
Second Encore?
Because there is
second Encore.
Well, there is
There are
Encore and
multiple
Second Encore. Yeah, weirdly.
So you're probably learning
that's
how
me
much
doing
time
my
I
research
spent.
into that.
Yeah.
That's part of
Rich
my
looks
research,
things up on
guys.
YouTube. I did not. Oh, actually, that's not true. I did look something up on YouTube. But yeah, I mean, I thought, given that I've heard Rich talk about these kind of things in the same way that you talk about shmups, in the same way that you talk about other games that require patience, that require practice. Give me the instant gratification of a cyberpunk where you can go and chop people's heads off, like with the press of a button, rather than sitting there for 20 minutes trying to learn how to kick someone in the shins without falling over.
That is literally what I was doing before you guys turned up.
Yeah. And I think for me, rather than I think possibly because I just didn't feel like I was making any progress, the overwhelming sense I got. It's very similar to when I sit there browsing Netflix or something like that. It's just like I am spending so much time trying to learn how to do these basic things. I could be doing. There's so many other games I could be playing, and I don't have the patience for that particular type of experience. That is what I have learned over the past couple of weeks.
Okay.
So,
go on, Rich.
I was going to say, just because I think for me, like the key thing there is that basic level of like
competency.
Basically, yeah. Because like once I had that, and I felt a lot more confident approaching a bunch of games with that kind of like basic level that still was not very good, but I could at least go into it and be like, oh, that's what's different about this one, or that's what I need to be doing. Like, I felt like I'd suddenly opened up this entire fucking genre of games that was like previously inaccessible. And it's almost like this kind of weird gatekeeping mechanism. Like you must have this level of execution before you can enter kind of territory.
Yeah.
And for me, it was once I'd kind of attained that reasonably low level though it was still like a hurdle that needed to be overcome. It was a lot easier for me to drill into a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And start to work out what I liked.
And is that level then the sort of the base level? Is that the understanding a bit around the like some of the mechanisms and the mechanics around things like stun lock and those kind of things, or is it?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, like having confidence in my ability to do certain well-known like motions with a joystick.
Yes.
Right, would be another thing where like, okay, I know that if I go into a game, I've learnt enough about Ryu from Street Fighter 2 that I could go into a game. If it's a 2D fighting game, chances are the first character on the character select screen will play kind of broadly, sort of similarly to Ryu. So a lot of the movements will be kind of broadly, sort of similar.
Yes.
And then after that, you get into the realms of being able to like even like read the notation that some of the games might have in the command things, or understand some of the terminology, all that kind of stuff. It was almost like kind of when I was learning to drive. There's a kind of new bit of lingo that you need to get, a kind of mechanical set of skills that it's useful to have.
Sheep comes across the road, you press a button. That's dangerous.
Yeah, it's the same as like, oh, they're jumping at me, I know I need to do some kind of move to counter that now. Yeah. It's that kind of thing.
You put it in reverse and accidentally Hadouken the sheep.
Yeah, exactly. We've all been there. But that is, in hindsight, what it felt like. And I think the pandemic coming along and me having this kind of urge meant that, ironically, for me saying about like being kind of time poor, like I'm definitely time poor now, but at the time, I'm using the word time far too much. I had the time to invest the time to learn these things. And I think if I was trying to go in from cold now, I think it'd be a much trickier proposition. So I think for me, it was just a case of right place, right time. Yeah. And now I feel confident going in and like being absolutely fucking bodied. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I will go into a game, be utterly destroyed, but I'd like to think I know enough now to know why.
Okay, yeah.
And so that means a lot of the frustration is lifted, because I will know, like, I was online on City of the Wolves before you guys turned up. I didn't win a single game, but I can tell you why I lost all of them. And all that kind of stuff. And that was another one of those hurdles where it's like, okay, I'm starting to develop that level of understanding now. I'm starting to read it in the way that I think somebody wanted me to. And that means that I can, take something from it that I find immensely satisfying.
So that's interesting then, because that's definitely some of the problem that I had with it. Was I felt so Skullgirls has a fairly detailed tutorial system which kind of walks you through some stuff. And honestly, when I was going through that, it felt a little bit like the experience of trying to install Linux based on helpful message board threads. Everybody means super well, or most people mean super well.
Most people. But I'm going to put this guy's Linux right up.
Can we just assume that I don't know what a man page is before I start? You know?
Get some basic terminology explained.
Yeah, and
wait, I better not.
And it said
mansplain a man page, please. I'm like, what?
But the tutorials, it almost felt like satire to me coming at it from outside, because honestly it felt like being taught, this is the number 3, this is the number 6. Now long divide 6 by 3, and it's like, I don't think they long divide. It's like, well, you're clearly not being paying enough attention.
Go back and do it again, idiot.
And it was bizarre. It felt like it took me 2 minutes to go from this is the button to move left, this is the button to move right, to this is how to get out of an infinite combo. If that happens, it'll just flash red. And I distinctly remember being stuck for ages on the combo defense one, where it's just they're hitting you high low. So Skullgirls is a game where I think it's generally, you can correct me if this is wrong, because I think you've also poked about at it. Yeah. It goes quickly. Like the attacks, the AI is known for being a bit aggressive.
Yeah.
So it just launches at you. And me, as someone who could barely do a fighting game, on one of the first tutorials, it was quite disheartening that it took me almost 15 minutes to clear that, because you've got to block a combination, and it's like overheads and low kicks, so you need to be at different, like, crouch blocking or standing blocking at the right time. It's going very quickly. I'm not in my 20s anymore. I can't react that quickly. I have no manual dexterity. I never felt like Octodad more than when I was playing a fighting game. Cosplaying as a human with fingers. It's really, and I think that was it. It just felt disheartening to me, and I couldn't work out what I was doing wrong. I think it probably didn't help that initially I was playing it on the dock, and I later learned, Super Bowl night was when I learned that the Steam Deck dock has a horrendous lag problem with wireless controllers. So my input was not registering quick enough anyway, so I'd never had a hope in hell of being able to actually do it.
So, just speaking about both these games, then you've both been playing on your Steam Decks.
Yeah.
How do you find? I know what the answer to the question is, but I want to ask anyway. How do you find playing a fighting game on a handheld? Because the reason I'm asking that is Skullgirls. When I had a little go with it, just to kind of see what see what the podcasts are all about, to actually take part. And I got stuck on the very first tutorial, and I was like, "Fuck this!" But I tried to play on the Vita, and I just found it extremely difficult to do the inputs that it was asking me to do from the very first tutorial, and I was like, it felt sticky and hard to do on a handheld. So, what does the Steam Deck feel like doing that across those games? And
I've got a quick question for Rich actually on this.
Yeah.
So when you're playing on the Steam Deck, do you use D-pad or do you use stick?
I use stick.
Interesting.
Because I struggle to, on a D-pad, I've never been able to do any kind of motion input that is heading to the left.
Okay.
I can do it. It's just that I'm not confident and I'm not comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
Whereas stick or like a leverless controller, I'm much more comfortable with. It's I will always run it through a dock.
Yeah.
And have it hooked up to a stick. I guess the exception for that would be something like Street Fighter, where I'm so familiar with it, I'm reasonably comfortable going in. With the Steam Deck in particular, if I'm playing it handheld like that, I will quite often do something weird, like for the most part my inputs will be on the D-pad, but as soon as I'm doing like a quarter circle, I'm on the stick and then flicking back, and my thumb will jump between the two inputs.
Okay.
And that's just how I kind of have got reasonably comfortable doing it. But it's not my go-to. And certainly for like a bunch of the games that I've been playing recently, the big thing with the Steam Deck for me is the graphics, and how they are definitely at the stage now where they're starting to struggle to keep up with what's going on. So like City of the Wolves took me quite a lot of wrangling to get it to look like anything but a blurry pixelated mess, because it had like an automatic like resolution thing turned on. Pro tip, everybody, if you're listening and thinking of playing on Steam Deck, it'll run. It'll run. Just turn the dynamic resolution off. I think it's like Steam Deck HQ have a review of City of the Wolves. It's got some decent graphic settings on. Get it looking reasonably sharp and running well. This is the thing with Steam Deck communities. Like, they will quite often rally round and work out a way of making these things look good. I mean, even Tekken 8, I can get running on it looking okay. It's nowhere near as good as it would be on like a PS5 or an actual PC. But it'll work. Certainly good enough for me. Like, I'm never going to go pro or anything like that. Like, I enjoy the fact that I'm having to deal with something that is counted in 60ths of a second, and I like the satisfaction of knowing that I can work in that environment. But the odd little stutter here and there, the odd little drop frame, playing it on a Steam Deck is not going to be the end of my world.
Okay. I mean, I was going to say Haikers then. Well, once you took it out the dock, that is in, for example, the inputs and things for a game like this, and gaming in general. Obviously, I think that episode 13 or 14 or something was the first time you were on the podcast, and I was like, "Oh, you've got a Steam Deck, let's talk about it." And then I think I asked last year, I was like, "How's it going with the Steam Deck and things, and how's it go with this kind of game?" Like,
so this is when probably I need to try a different game to see if it was just the game was not cooperative with me, or if this is part of the reason that I asked Rich, like, is this just me, or is this the Steam Deck? Because I think one of the things that I find difficult about the Steam Deck is the button configuration. Skullgirls has 6 punchy buttons. Most of the ones that I played back in the day had 4 punchy buttons. That's the technical term. Rich doesn't know the technical term, but it's punchy buttons. Even though they kick as well, they're just
don't tell him the punchy button code.
And then you do different combinations of the punchy buttons, and they make some like fun throws and things happen. That's your general.
You're talking my kind of language.
This is what I mean. This is like indicative of my level of knowledge. But there are 6 buttons for different types of hits, like 3 kicks and 3 punches. I had to contort my hands into weird shapes to get some of them, and this was part of the problem I had when it does when the tutorial does go into long division mode and it says now hit this aerial combo with a change up halfway through or a cancel halfway through. I could never tell if I was too slow, if the Steam Deck was not registering my input on time, or if I was going too fast or too slow. I think what I really needed for those tutorials as a sort of quality of life improvement, I need some kind of Guitar Hero like too fast, too slow input to show me like what was I doing wrong in that combination, because there was no demonstration of what it was supposed to look like.
When the games do that, where it's just like, the rapper, I say it again, it's just like, you're not telling me what I'm doing fucking wrong.
But I'm sure the answer is just hammer the buttons as quickly as you possibly can. And if that's the case, then maybe I just wasn't fast enough. But there were some of them, and again, maybe it's because some of my early experiences were in Tekken, which is a little bit slower, where actually the timing of it is a little bit more like, okay, wait until one's connected before you hammer the next one. Whereas, particularly the air combos, it took me a good 20-25 minutes to clear some of those combos that were on the screen, partially because I sort of got snatches of what Rich talks about. You sort of see the Matrix. And you just, it's maybe an 8-move combo and I'm hitting the first 6 without thinking about it, just constantly, and then just thinking, okay, next time, how do I make sure once I do that I go to the next one, practice that bit of it, and then I can't do the first 6 again. And I can sort of get like glimpses of a world that I will never inhabit, which is a world that I did kind of get more into it, that I had more patience for it, and that I could see that being really satisfying. But then I sort of look at the kind of combos and then just think, am I ever going to play as this character? There's like how many characters?
Yeah. That's the thing. And like I think when it first came out, especially, I get the impression that the Skullgirls tutorial was like lauded as being pretty good, but we've moved on since then. So like, nowadays you are much more likely to get a wider range of modes to go into different bits and bobs. You're much more likely to get demonstrations about what it's meant to look like in the game, and all this kind of stuff. But then like the control thing, I was watching it was I was like a Maximilian Dude video on YouTube, was talking about quite a lot of games nowadays having like one button specials. So like you'll have a special button and you press a direction, kind of like Smash Bros, but for fighting games. And his point was about how you're kind of getting this reliance on needing macros and stuff like that now. And I think what you're talking about with playing on handheld on the Steam Deck is exactly that, with Skullgirls like needing so many buttons pressed at once. There's no way you can do that unless you are playing on a proper stick and you can just like slam your hand down.
I knew that's how you do it. I knew that's how you do it.
But it's that kind of thing. It's that kind of thing where you do genuinely start to run out of buttons, like, if you're not careful. I think finding a control scheme that works for you is partly how the game is set up. So like City of the Wolves, for example, is like a 4 or 5 button game, depending on how you're counting it, which obviously lends itself to that handheld play a bit more, because that gives you a bit more leeway with macros, and if you need to assign a certain combination of something, you've got spare buttons to use, and it all makes a difference. And I think like so many people I could see being put off the fighting game genre because they've had a couple of bad experiences with broadly similar games without going, oh well, actually, if I'm trying to input stuff really, really fast, why don't I play like one of the crazy anime fighting games, and then that'll go exactly as fast as I can. Like that will keep pace with me. Or like I don't like doing these massive long combos. I would prefer to be able to just play really patiently, really calmly, carefully, like go and play Samurai Showdown and stuff like that. Like there is this huge variety of them out there, but until you get over that initial hurdle of being able to know enough to know what you don't like or you're not going to get on with, you're kind of stuck, aren't you?
Any turn-based fighting games out there?
I think there are.
Absolutely,
genuinely, I think there are.
Yeah.
I would struggle to name them, but I've nearly picked 1 or 2 up before now. I think, like if I've understood the premise correctly.
That noise you heard was me crawling back into my box.
I think you described perfectly there, though, how I feel about it. That I would love to find the one. For me. But then to go through 20, 30 games to then find that feels like, whilst you're right saying that, that they are really good with your time, you would have to do that first to go through the rigmarole to go, right, which is my one. And I've never really found that, apart from like Haikers referred to before, where you could be sat there on a couch drinking, having fun and stuff, and that's why I always just ended up reverting back to things like Smash Bros and stuff, where it's just like they just respect that I'm terrible and let me wail and flail. And
it's just like it is a fighting game. It is a fighting game, despite what some people say. It is a fighting game, and if you care about it that much, you play Smash Bros Ultimate and you play as Ryu or someone from Tekken, and you use the actual inputs. Like, it's a fucking fighting game.
So the question that kind of came in my brain there was about how I know Skullgirls is kind of like described as a hardcore fighter almost, more so than it is. And I don't know how you feel about that, looking at both of you here, but then obviously Rich, in terms of that, comparative to your wider knowledge of all the fighting games that you've been playing recently, is that true, or is it just that the fan base describing it that way, or
I mean it. I would say it's certainly not casual. Like I don't think it's necessarily.
Wish I knew that before I started.
This is the thing.
That's the question. I was like, wait a minute.
But this is the kind of thing that you've got to caveat it heavily, though, because like much more recently, you've got games like DNF Duel or Grand Blue Fantasy Versus and all that kind of stuff that make more of a point of finding ways to be more accommodating. Now, I picked up DNF Duel recently and enjoyed it. Like, it was fun, but I had that moment of like, but I'm not able to use a lot of the skills that I've worked hard to try and develop.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like maybe I'm not enjoying it as much as I would have had I picked it up, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, were it out. And so like I think there are games that have come along since that make more of a point of being accommodating in a way that Skullgirls is not. And like I would argue like City of the Wolves, because I was talking this through with my wife the other day, who was watching me play it and just leant over and was like, "Are you actually enjoying this?" And I was like, "Why?" just like,
blood,
are you?
Blood trickled down his nostril.
But it was the kind of question that I never knew needed asking until I heard it. And then I was like, "Am I? Am I?" Because I was ready for this game to come out. I was really looking forward to it, and like I had it pre-ordered and all this kind of stuff. And I wasn't alone in thinking that maybe it perhaps didn't quite fulfill a degree of hype potential. I don't know. And so the way I ended up putting it to her was like, you know how you will have like certain books or films that are kind of have a very literary reputation. They're very highbrow. There's a certain level of
Godfather?
Well, I don't know. Like,
Is that a book?
Yeah.
I was going to go with Ulysses, but sure.
Godfather. I think I was just meant like obviously from like that famous Family Guy sketch where it's like it insists upon itself or something like that. It's like something could be thought upon as the pedestal of. In fact, I was listening to IGN podcast today, and they were talking about a question about what would be the things that. In the year 4000, what would it be that you would say, is the movie that everybody would remember from this age and stuff? And The Godfather was mentioned, for example.
Got you.
Continue with your point, sorry.
Yeah, so the point is that there are certain like cultural touchstones that have a reputation for being like relatively obtuse or difficult to get into, but once you're in and you've gone through it, you've kind of earned your stripes and you're part of the club now and all that kind of stuff. And
absolutely not what I mentioned. Carry on, yeah.
Yeah, of course it was. That's because you didn't wait for me to finish my fucking point.
I never do. And I'm not going to now. So, no, just carry on.
But the point is that like this game felt like that. It felt like it came with a certain like aloofness to it.
Okay.
Where it was like, no, I'm not going to go into masses of detail. Like certainly when it comes to tutorials and stuff like that, it gives you the bare bones of the mechanics and then just kind of lets you deal with it. Or like the combo trials, there's only a handful of them and they ramp up pretty quickly, but like it doesn't really give you much hand holding to the extent I think there's a patch coming out like tomorrow as of recording time along with the new DLC character and stuff like that will add in more stuff into the training mode because it kind of feels like it's just going to go, well, here's what you could do with it, go figure it out, friend. You know, you're in there, and it's got like
in that tone of voice.
Yeah, that's the thing. There is almost a, like, I don't want to say it's condescending, but like there is almost like an expected level of ability with it that I'm not sure sits comfortably with me.
Okay.
That was until half an hour before you guys turned up, because like I'd gone through various characters and trying different things and all this kind of stuff, and hadn't really found like a kind of quote unquote main character, or one that like I kind of had any kind of like emotional connection would be too strong, right? But for a long, like the way I was talking about it yesterday with my wife was like, I just don't feel like I'm connecting with it. Like I'm ready to partake in this, but it is not meeting halfway, and it's not giving me enough. Like there's so much on paper. It ticks so many of my boxes for like music, style, and all that kind of stuff. I'm not a huge fan of the kind of King of Fighters art style nowadays, but this is just far enough removed that I'm okay, more on board with it. But then it was just before you guys turned up this evening that I started to click with this big burly wrestling dude called Tizok that has a big old griffin mask.
Why wouldn't you?
Excellent. But that's the thing. Why wouldn't I? Again, tick so many boxes. I love wrestling. Why was I not playing as this guy from the fucking start? But like, it's
typecast yourself, you know.
Well, you got to try out some other things occasionally, haven't you? But the point is that like it all started coming together. It all started making sense, and like I was starting to have fun with it. I was starting to be able to go, okay, well, if I'm going to try and do this, and I'm going to try and to get into that move, what do I need to do to get me to that point? All that kind of stuff, or like going in and playing online and being like, okay, this guy's absolutely mullered me with this massive, long, impressive looking combo a couple of times now. Oh, wait, if I block, he's not actually stopping doing it. He's just learned how to do it like parrot style. He's not paying attention to what I'm doing. So then I kept losing because I was trying to work out the point that I could interrupt him. Yeah. Couldn't find it. And then I was like, well, fine, I'll just wait then. And lo and behold, I started making some headway. And it was that, like, it's taken a long time to just get to the stage where I can start to read the game in the terms that the game wants to be read. And so I think, like, that is what I would define as a hardcore fighting game, personally. As a filthy casual, like, that is what I would say, like, would constitute a hardcore fighting game. And I think City of the Wolves is pretty friggin' hardcore. Like, it's certainly not going to cut you much slack. Like, it's got a friendlier control scheme and all that kind of stuff, but it's just sort of giving you stuff, right? It just gives you the mechanics. It's got a lot of defensive options, a lot more than other fighting games I could mention. And like, theoretically, you could live in that game, right? But it has little consideration for guiding you through it. Like, you can go work that shit out on your own.
I was going to say, how would I know that coming to a
Dream
game?
Council wiki, you would go into a game and find out, like, what you're meant to be doing with it. Yeah. But you would find it out the hard way. Yeah. That you would need to go and work it out. Or, like, there's a kind of sliding scale. Like, I know when we've talked about Tekken 8 before now and stuff like that. Like, that felt like it was almost being a bit too hand-holdy for what it needed to do or wanted to do. Kind of to a detriment. But then I was playing a couple of the older Tekkens recently, and they are doing what City of the Wolves does now, where it's like, well, this is what you could do. Have fun, suss it. And then I would argue Street Fighter 6 finds a good middle ground between giving you the options, but then also talking you through what a character could do and what their kind of basic game plan could look like. Yeah. Which is the key bit for me. Like, Street Fighter 6 has that baked into the game, whereas something like City of the Wolves doesn't. You got to go and work it out and lab it yourself, or find somebody that knows and pick their brains and stuff like that.
Okay. In terms of then with Skullgirls, Haikers, like, did you obviously, like you said before, you didn't really know that it was necessarily what we inverted commas call hardcore or anything, but getting into the actual fighting part of it, and did you feel that, or did you have any other sense of anything else? Or?
It's hard for me to know, because I like, what reference point have I got?
That's what I mean.
And I could sort of feel Rich wanting to step in to defend the genre from my character assassination, which to be clear, it's like it doesn't fit with me, but I understand the appeal. It's just, a lot of those things don't appeal to me. But to your actual question, rather than desperately trying to avoid getting slapped by Rich in the break, I've forgotten your question. So to
the actual question, I guess what I was trying to say was that how did it feel like a hardcore fighter to you? Because but that is in, and you don't have a reference point, but like for me, you should be able to come to a game as a new adopter, and then you should be able to sort of at least get into it somehow.
Yeah. So okay, the nearest example or the best metaphor I can come up with it for is it felt a little bit like playing a board game that I didn't know when everyone else knows what the game is and wants to crack on with the game, and they sort of want to win, so they have to tell you the rules.
Okay.
It had that feeling, and I don't have that level of ability that Rich said, so I don't know why I lose. I can't tell why I'm losing. So in Skullgirls, for example, I think, hey, this is on me, I should have done more research. I ended up accidentally picking one of the characters that was DLC, which probably means they weren't the most straightforward of characters to work with. But I did everything I should. I went through the character-specific tutorials. I think her name was Squiggly, some kind of a dead emo-styled girl with a bone dragon thing on her shoulder that spoke like a butler. Great, right? No notes. No notes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I did and again, this is where I could see the tutorial. It would speak to me in a way. It was like, okay, right, fine. So I've got a couple of different stances. I've got a couple of different, like they basically said, here are your moves. Like here's the basic move, and here, you can power this up by doing kind of low kick, medium kick, high kick as your three kind of variants to it. So, have a play with that. It's like, okay, right, great, I'll do that. But then I could only really focus on one thing at a time. I could focus on the blocking and not getting my backside handed to me, or I could focus on doing the inputs right. I felt miles away from the level where I'd be able to do more than one thing. I would be that person who learns one combo and just hammers that combo in the hope that I connect with the first one, because if not, my goodness me, I'm in trouble. And it didn't feel like I was improving. It felt there were certain fights. So there are several difficulty modes. So it caters to a variety of different audiences by giving you, different difficulty settings. I'm sure that's not uncommon in the fighting genre. I was the one below the easiest setting, which was called easy. I think it was like easy and snooze fest or something like that. I wasn't quite ready for snooze fest, so I went for easy, and I played through Squiggly's campaign. And honestly, I think some of the reason that I don't have the time for it is some of the tropes of fighting games drive me absolutely crackers. The lore is utterly impenetrable and makes absolutely no sense. Makes sense in the days when you'd get like a disc and someone had copied the disc, so you don't have the manual anymore, so you can't read the lore and the backstories. But in this day and age, there's absolutely no excuse for throwing you into something with with zero context. I think. And again, perhaps some of this is because DLC character, but starting at a family wedding, which is loosely based on Romeo and Juliet, as far as I can tell, and there being like a kind of mass murder, which somehow explains why your character is now dead and also alive again. And searching for the powerful skull that's going to give you your heart's desire with a dragon that's talking to you as though you've been there for. It feels like I've accidentally jumped into the 8th book of the series. It feels like the time that I was reading Dune and accidentally skipped the 3rd book without realizing, and didn't realize until the end of the book, but also by the same author page, because I was like, I'd heard it gets weird. I guess it got really weird.
That really escalated.
Yeah, it escalated quickly between 3 years past the book and 3,000 years past the book. Spoilers for book 4 of the Dune series from the 1960s. What was I talking about? So an awful lot of that kind of stuff just left me cold. I didn't get to the end and think, great, I want to do this with a different character and get a different perspective on the same story, because I don't need multiple LSD trips. It's sort of fine. I like the art style, but again, it was just there were certain characters where I would, on easy, you could sort of walk a lot of the fights just with some of the basic moves, block occasionally. Gets harder as you go, but that's what you expect, and a couple of losses. But then there was, I think it was Philia, who's essentially the equivalent of Ryu or whatever, the kind of the starting character. Just even on easy, was absolutely handing my backside to me. And I tried the campaign with another couple of characters that had different mechanics, and for some reason the AI just seems, either the AI is great with her, or I am dreadful at fighting against that particular style.
Yeah.
But I couldn't. It was so relentless that I couldn't counter it. I couldn't take a step back and go, right, okay, what am I doing here? Because even when I was blocking, she was going high, low, high, low, high, low. I just couldn't, even on easy. It was struggling. I can hear the 12 people like screaming "get good" at me, and absolutely, it's that's not the game's fault.
No, but that's kind of like, I guess the next question heading towards Rich then is that.
I like how this is playing out like a fighting game, by the way.
Just
back and forth.
It's working quite well, again, don't plan this podcast. But psychoanalyzing that a little bit is sort of like, it does that sound like something that you think, you could help Haikers cure it? Is it like, over time, or is that? But seriously, that is in. Could do you think that you could help somebody kind of go, all right, actually, I can see what the problems are here, and this is the issue, or is it just not for? It sounds like it definitely wouldn't be for me. So is it not for us?
So, there are people who it's not uncommon for professional players to as part of I don't know, Patreon things, offer to analyze your footage of you playing and go oh well, if you'd have done that there, this would have happened, or you could have approached it this way, and basically coach. That is the level some of these games get to, where you can coach and be coached. For me, what worked when I was struggling to sort of get my head around the basic mechanics was you fast forward from Skullgirls to Mortal Kombat X, and that has a story mode that is maybe 3 hours long, but decent production values, enough to get me invested. But you will go through a bunch of different characters, you will have a bunch of different fights, and you can tailor the difficulty level to be reasonably sedate and welcoming, and you can use that to start to get into it. Some of the recent Tekken games have had story mode, pretty substantial story modes as well, that will also have that kind of absolutely ludicrous escalation, to the extent that my wife will go away and then come back an hour later, see that now someone sprouted wings and is firing lasers out their eyes and flying around the sky, and then she'll just go, "What is a Tekken?" and stuff like that. And it's become a bit of a catchphrase in the house now. When we've just walked in on something that we don't understand, it'll be "But what is a Tekken?" and all that kind of stuff. And that is part of the appeal for me. I like how ludicrous some of these things are, and I think there are ways you can get into these things, but it's so much of it, so much of it, between mechanics, control schemes, and modes and all that kind of stuff, is just having the time and to find out what works for you. It's tired advice, it really is, but it is the best advice I could give, is just try a bunch of different things. Some of it will work, some of it definitely won't. And for me, story modes were a good way of starting to dip my toe, but I only started to radically improve when I was brave and went online and started getting utterly bodied by human beings. Because then I went back, and this is what happened with, it would have been Street Fighter 5 by this point. I was going through the story mode in that, hit a wall, and was fuck me, I just can't, I don't have the skills to get past this. And it's the fucking story mode, man. What is wrong with me? And I saw this piece of advice online somewhere, which was just get some matches under your belt. It doesn't matter if you win, doesn't matter if you lose. The aim is you will learn, right? You just go in trying to learn and have that mindset of it doesn't matter if I win or lose. I just need to get something from it. And lo and behold, that worked for me. Yeah. Because I then went back into story mode, and suddenly I was starting to see the game in a completely different light. And it was almost like the AI had suddenly been ramped up. But then the next match was considerably lower because I was playing against somebody completely different. And then it was up again, and then it was starting to kind of calibrate somewhere in the middle a couple of times. And you have that moment of I can beat real people. I can actually win some of these games. And that was huge for my own confidence of being shit, maybe I can learn some of this stuff. Maybe I can do it. I am not the worst person in the world at any of these things. Fuck yeah. And like it matters, right?
Yeah,
Having that little light bulb moment really mattered to me.
Do you think that little spark there when you talk about get online and start learning from other people and things, that describes the community around fighting games well, in terms of that, just the drive to be better together, the competitive nature? That's where you get things like Evo and stuff? Or?
I mean, in very broad strokes, yes, but it's not going to be the universal case because you've got some right wankers out there. Of course you do. It's the internet. But like, there are a not insignificant chunk of this community that, you know, still remember the days of huddling around arcades and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, would much rather play real people than a computer. And would much rather learn and teach other people through that. And starting to tap into that, I'm starting to see the appeal. And like, I would, you know, not think twice now about playing a complete stranger down at Arcade Club or whatever. Whereas, you know, it wouldn't have been too long ago where I'd be like, oh no, that's far too scary.
It is scary.
Of course it is. Like, I kid you not, right? This is no exaggeration. First time I went online on Street Fighter, I was fucking shaking, man. I kid you not. And then you have totally that moment of like,
understand that.
Why? Why? And I think what it was, right? Was whenever I had played stuff online before, there was like it was a shooting game or something like that. It would be a team thing. And so like my performance, if it was abysmal, was unlikely to be the kind of straw that broke the camel's back, right? Whereas in a fighting game, you got no one. That's you, right? And that made it daunting. But that also made winning that little bit sweeter. Yeah.
Nice. Haikers.
Yeah.
In terms of Skullgirls, then, it obviously sounds like you had a bit of a difficult time with the actual sort of like mechanics of the game. You know, but it's a really well-reviewed game generally. Any redeeming features for you personally that you enjoyed about the game?
Look, I was drawn to, I was drawn to it, probably not it, but because of other games in the Humble Bundle. So that's probably a strong way to do it. But I installed that rather than going to the Steam store and finding something else, because the art style, like the sort of, it's got a sort of, I describe it as Art Deco. I don't know if that is accurate.
I think that's right,
kind of like gothy Art Deco.
Gothy Art Deco, exactly. And I sort of like the general aesthetic of it. It's sort of cartoony, so it's you know, it's not. I don't know, something about the visuals. They're very smooth. It's very good. When you get into the game, some of the visuals are a little bit male gazy. So probably you know that the luster wore off on that one. But do you know, it's the perfect game for someone else is probably how I would describe it. And I think the problem that I have with Skullgirls is not Skullgirls, it's that I was the dude who was playing it. That's the main problem. I was just sat there saying, like, and it is exactly that. It's to get to a level where I need to get good. It's going to take me a lot of effort, and I've got a lot of other unplayed games in my Steam deck that I know that I'm going to kind of vibe with, to use the term that all the kids definitely use. So it's a little bit more that feeling of I think my window for fighting games, unless let's hope we don't have another pandemic, but maybe that'll be the impetus I need. But for me, like, I'll always be a casual fighting game person. I will always be the person that, like, I still have a really, really good memory of us being, I'm pointing at Rich, Rich and I being in Fab Cafe in Manchester, drinking after a gig, sat around the little SNES consoles that they've got kind of set out there on the tellies, just having a pint, and Rich handing me my backside with Street Fighter, and then like playing it backwards or something like that to give me a chance. I don't mind that. It was a very good evening, and I think I beat you like once or twice, possibly on Tekken rather than Street Fighter.
He's asleep. Get him.
Pretty much. It's like pool. You just need to wait until they. It's just his default mode. Throw him. I don't know how. So look, I have no ill feelings towards it, and it's just I tried, and it just there's still something about the genre that doesn't grab me in the single player mode. You know what? If I didn't pathologically hate the internet and everyone that's on it. Maybe I would give that a go as well. But I just stay away from multiplayer. I definitely wasn't good enough to even
consider it.
Dip a toe in. I wouldn't have learned anything. Apart from probably some slurs, I imagine. Assuming it's like other bits of the internet. Do you get voice over IP for fighting games? Can you sledge?
I think it kind of depends on things. Like I think you're more likely to get it like in lobbies and stuff like that. But even then, in my experience, it's been relatively rare that anybody does anything like that. It tends to just be like a kind of you might get like a little thumbs up or like reaction type thing, or like all that kind of stuff. For the most part, in my experience, when people have been playing online, they've been perfectly reasonable and perfectly sensible, and no one's really using the chat.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, okay. Now I'm convinced.
It's actually kind of perfect.
And I'm sat here like genuinely wanting to dip back in and give it another go and see if I can find a character that does sort of, get me into that zone a bit more often, where I feel like I can sort of see what's going on. We'll see. Check in with me in a year's time.
Yeah. Okay. Can you give it a highly subjective score?
If you want the highly subjective score,
that will, basically be like bait for people.
The rage bait. That's absolutely fine. And they can direct all correspondence to you.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That's
You said highly subjective, so for me, that game is a 3 or a 4.
Yeah. Okay.
But that is again,
that's for you.
That is a highly subjective score.
We will stress this several thousand times.
So is it going on the spreadsheet as a 3 or a 4?
Stick it as a 3, because that's what I was originally going to say until I became scared when you said that it's a hardcore fighting game with fans.
We need more 3s.
We need more 3s.
For admin purposes. Right, Rich, your closing statements on Fatal Fury, City of the Wolves then.
Yeah. So I came in here about 90% sure of the score I was going to give it. And then I finally feel like I had a breakthrough. I kid you not, in the half hour before we came and started recording. It's not all plain sailing with it, right? Like there are a lot of sort of questionable things about like the guest characters and, SNK being like Saudi funded, and is there some kind of weird sports washing thing at work with like Ronaldo being in there and all that? Like there's
when
some
you said
odd
that,
questions.
I thought that was a typo. Honestly,
yeah, no, he's in there, but he's actually weirdly a kind of a good example of one of the things that I'm less of a fan of with the game, because like there are times where you're playing it and it just feels like they've kind of cut a couple of corners, and it's a little bit like you can feel the budget wasn't necessarily there for stuff, and you're like, if you hadn't spent the licensing money on Ronaldo, maybe we wouldn't have like music that cuts out between menu items, or we would have a single player mode where you can create your own character to level up, rather than leveling up a character that you can go into arcade mode and just play as anyway. Like, why am I having to level up, an existing character from like NAF all? And like, there are story beats in there, but it's all told in like a kind of visual novel, almost like seeing texts go backwards and forwards kind of a way. And it's all those kinds of little bits and bobs where it's just like, have you just cut some corners here though?
Yeah.
That and the fact that as best I can tell, I had some numbers written down actually, like it fell off pretty hard after it came out. So like on, I think it was Steam charts or something like that, the 30 days to 31st of May, there were like 831 people playing this game.
Oh my god!
Whereas for Street Fighter 6, there were like 15,400.
Mad.
I mean, I checked this evening, and that number for Mark of the Wolves was down 30-day average number of players to 300. Whereas Street Fighter 6 has gone up to like 17,000. So I mean, again, at time of recording, Fatal Fury's first DLC character will come out tomorrow.
Yeah.
So there might be a little bit of an upswing, and there'll be some changes. So it'll be interesting to see if it's kind of
just one character.
Yeah, but they're not doing it as like a season pass thing, so you're not having to pay extra once you've paid it. Like they're just adding them to the game, which is cool. But to go to the point I alluded to about Ronaldo, like again with the cut corners and stuff like that, you can't play as him in the mode where you have to level a character from nothing. It's almost like there's a clause in the contract that's like, well, he can't be shown to be weak or something.
He's got that 6-pack. Come on now.
there's just those little bits to it that you're like, it's so close, close to greatness.
The new character that you can get, is that Infantino?
No, alas.
Cowards. Absolute cowards.
Give it time. Give it time. But they are going to be putting some characters from Street Fighter in it as well. So, I mean, but this was the other thing. Like, a couple of my favourite characters shy of discovering T-Zog, you could play in Street Fighter 6. So I'm like, well, why am I going to bother with City of the Wolves? I can play him in the game that I know what I like. So you've got all these sorts of oddities around it. So I'm going to give it a 7. I was so close to giving it an 8, but I think with fighting games in general nowadays, you almost have to give them time and like be reviewing them like a year or two after they've come out. Like, I know in theory they're going to be adding a lot more characters to this and all that, but like, it kind of, I mean, I think I've been spoiled by Street Fighter 6, right? Like, sure, it's got like pop-ups about stores and battle passes and all this kind of stuff, but you feel like, and I realised when it doesn't happen on City of the Wolves, like, it kind of makes me feel like the developers are out there and they're actively engaging with it and working on it still. Whereas, you know, the updates for City of the Wolves were reasonably few and far between, and and it might just be the circles I move in and my phone algorithms or whatever. But like, I got this feeling that if you give it a year, it's going to not necessarily be in the place that we all hoped it would be when it first came out.
Okay.
So I'm going to give it a 7. But that is on the proviso that you could probably add or minus like a good solid 2 points. Either way.
It's interesting that you say that, though. It's just like more and more, not even just fighting games, but certainly in this genre. Like, you're just starting to get that where it was like with Tekken 8, where you're like, I want to talk about Tekken 8 now, like a week before there's a major patch and stuff. And then we ran into that thing where it's like, oh, it's shit.
Oh, well, this is the thing, right? Because like we had that. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad we gave Tekken the score we gave it in the end, because it has really fallen off. But then here I am, like a month or two after that, and I've since gone back to like
patched it again. Didn't they?
Well, they have patched it again a little bit, and they will be patching it again. But I went back to Tekken 7 for a bit and was like, there's nothing here. Like there's so little single player content. I'm like, shit. Was I too hard on Tekken 8? Because, like, fuck me, at least it was trying. Like, at least there's some stuff there. And then I went back to, what was it, Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection Online or something like that. I was like, oh no, this is Tekken. This is my warm bath Tekken. This is what I wanted. Just re-release this. Guys, just re-release it. And, you know, that's got naffle single player content. And it also doesn't have meters, and it's better for it. But that's a discussion for another day.
I'm nodding and smiling.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Someone else can talk about that. Right, I haven't got any further questions about fighting. You've done a stellar job between you both to talk through those two different experiences. I really enjoyed that, so that was good. So,
that was good.
Yeah, and we didn't end up kicking my head in, so that's great.
Hooray!
So join us next time, guys. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll speak to you soon.
Cheers.
K.O.
Oh, God, Lord.